And we are live. Welcome everyone that is following us at home. Welcome to the panel. My name is Rafael Pinto. I'm the Senior Policy Manager at the European Vegetarian Union, and I will be your host for this panel. Let's change the game. Time for healthy competition. And with me, I have four fantastic game changers, starting with Camilla Björkbom. She's the political advisor on food policy at Eurogroup for Animals. She's working on food with the aim to improve animal welfare in Europe's food systems at EU policy level. We also have Louise Johansen. She's the head of programs at the Vegetarian Society of Denmark and has played an important role in paving the way for the Danish Action Plan for Plant-Based Foods, as well as the Plant-Based Food Grant. We have Olivier Morice joining us from Paris. He's the EU Public Affairs Officer at the French Animal Protection Organization, L214, which he joined in 2021 after years of activism in the animal rights movement. And we also have Marcin Tischner. He's a public affairs coordinator and sustainability expert at ProVeg Poland, and is committed to finding effective ways to create a more sustainable future for the food sector. He collaborates with retailers and across the chain with public authorities to encourage the change to more sustainable food systems and to educate about the alternative protein sector. So welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be your host this evening, and let's get right into the first question. So the title of our panel is Let's Change the Game. It's time for healthy competition. Now, in your view, what does healthy competition mean in the context of today's food system? How can it help to accelerate the transition to more sustainable plant-based solutions? And I'll go straight to you, Marcin.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I guess it can have many meanings, healthy competition, but let me maybe say something from my local Polish market, for which I'm most familiar with. So I would say, for example, here in the Polish plant-based sector, we see an encouraging trend, I would say, that the plant-based producers, at least the ones that I'm in touch with, they recognize that we are all playing in the same team. So instead of competing between each other for the biggest slice of the current plant-based market, they have this approach that the only way to grow is to expand the market as a whole. So there is a shared understanding that the competitors that launch high-quality plant-based products, if that's the situation, it benefits everybody. So the consumers then perceive the entire category more positively. It drives growth for everybody. And I've heard many times that the worst competitor in this industry is actually a producer with a low quality products.
That's an interesting take on the competitive market. Olivier, how do you see the situation in France? Do you believe that you have a level playing field and there's healthy competition between the plant-based side of foods and the animal-based side?
Not really. The competition is definitely not healthy. Prices in the food environment in general are artificial, and the prices of meat and dairy is very low today because of the amount of subsidies. So these different products do not compete in a level playing field for sure. So it's good that we have this panel to go deep into the reason why the food environment is so biased and how we can change it.
So we got a perspective from Poland, from France. Now, Louise, in Denmark, is the market a little bit more leveled, or there's still a long way to go?
Well, I will also align a bit with Olivier. So there will still be a very long way to go, and definitely because of their heavy subsidies that is taking place and economic support, which is not kind of creating a level playing field between the animal-based and plant-based sectors as well. And I will also say, like, for building up more healthy competition, I will also kind of focus on like actually getting more knowledge or educating actually professional in the different types of sector. It could also be the finance and agricultural sector, because they have been so heavily focused on animal-based proteins and animal-based crops for so long. So their knowledge with all these professionals working in their agricultural sector or generally in the food sector is actually quite low. And that could actually also help perhaps create a more level playing field if we put more knowledge into these professionals.
That's a very interesting perspective, Louise. So it's not only the subsidies that we're talking about or the taxes on different foods, but even the whole system and of knowledge is more targeted towards one side of the food system. Camilla, working in EU policy, one of the favorite terms that people in Brussels like to use is the level playing field. What's the level playing field like now? What could it look like for a leveled food system?
Yes, I think we have a lot of work ahead of us, and I wanted to come back to the concept that Olivier mentioned. So he talked about food environments, which I think is really a key concept, because the food environment is where consumers make their food choices. And at the moment, consumers, by the way that supermarkets are structured, by pricing, even how products are placed, what products are available, consumers are pushed towards more unhealthy, more unsustainable, more meat and dairy products. Even though consumers, when they are polled in surveys, they say they want to eat more healthy, sustainable food, they're interested in plant-based food, but they find it difficult to make those choices. So they find these barriers in accessing the food. So I think that like food environments is really like a key concept when we talk about fair competition. And I think especially in Brussels, now there is a debate and also proposals even to ban certain meat-like names for say veggie burgers, vegan sausages, etc., which would make it even more difficult for consumers to find those products. So we are really facing obstacles for a level playing field. And as some of you may know that has already been the case for, I would say oat milk, but the term that we are supposed to use or that the companies need to use is oat drinks, which is also an obstacle for consumers that want to switch from dairy milk to plant-based milk.
So Camilla, what do you say to the proponents of consumer freedom that state that consumers should be free to choose any of the products, and that the government or the EU should not should not make consumers eat a certain way, should give them just freedom? What would you say to that argument?
That is a very interesting argument, because I think what food environments really show is that consumers are not the ones that decide ultimately what is put on their plate. Someone else already made the decision by the advertising, by the pricing, by the subsidies also, because the EU subsidies to agriculture have as one of their aims is to provide affordable food to consumers. But we also know that most of the subsidies, they do go to animal production.
Yeah. So going back to Louise, Denmark is the first country to launch this incredible plant-based action plan or action plan on plant-based foods. From your experience, what specific measures in the Danish approach have helped create a healthier competition between conventional and plant-based producers? And how is this plan, or how can this plan create more choices for consumers?
I don't know, perhaps we'll start a different place. I think like to actually have this like action plan, actually what helped was also what getting their farmers definitely on board and having kind of the talk about more plants. So kind of how can we engage and get more plant-based foods as well also. So kind of saying like getting them on board actually and speaking up about, like as also Marcin said, like actually making the cake bigger, like how can we actually kind of get people to eat more plant-based food as well, and to get them on board as well. And then also for creating like a healthier competition, I would not say it's because subsidies have been so heavily towards animal-based sector, then also creating this plant-based food grant that we perhaps will talk a bit later, also is a way to kind of get this kind of sector going and actually getting their support both in kind of building sectoral bridges, but also stimulating demand and supply actually have been something that is kind of keen as well also, because you need to create a market actually to create a healthy competition. And because the plant-based sectors for many years haven't had the same kind of support and subsidy, this is kind of also, we need to kind of also create like the same kind of, as we spoke about earlier, level playing field also to kind of in the support of creating actually a strong sector, plant-based sector.
Exactly. And Olivier, coming from France, a country such strong rooted traditions in gastronomy, how do you see this freedom of choice of consumers? Are currently in the current market, consumers are free to choose? Is there a healthy competition between the different sides of the agriculture industry?
Freedom of choice is just a myth, and people are made to believe that they are the one who choose their food, but like Camilla said, they are not. Because of marketing, because of subsidies, etc. It's been decided for them what they will eat at the end and what will end up in their plates. So I found it very disturbing and hypocritical when I hear policymakers saying that they want to defend the choice of consumers, while in the same time trying to ban certain meat names like veggie burger or vegetarian sausage.
Yeah, and now going back to Poland, I'm guessing the scenario is not much different for Polish consumers, Marcin?
Yeah, I mean, there are many structural ways in which meat is promoted, starting from our meals in schools, where meat, I think the recent surveys shows that around 80% of meals in schools are based on meat. Of course, we have a tradition in Poland to eat vegetarian meals or non-meat meals during Fridays, but it all sometimes comes up as a fish. Even though Poland culinary traditions are strongly related to pulses and legumes, which seems to be forgotten for the last years. But speaking also about the leveling the playing field, I think the one topic not mentioned yet is the VAT rates, which tend to be in general in Europe higher for plant-based alternatives than for their animal-based counterparts. In Poland, for example, there was a discussion a few years ago about increasing the VAT rate for plant-based milk to 23%, while cow milk remained at 5%. It fortunately didn't pass, but we still have some differences between plant-based meat and animal-based meat. It's 8 and 5% of VAT rate, so it still creates some, of course, some challenges, some problems for the pricing of plant-based alternatives.
And I think this is a perfect segue for the next question to Camilla, which is looking at the EU policy perspective. What can the EU change? In which policies can we act to ensure that there's a level playing field? Marcin here mentioned VAT rates. He also mentioned the school scheme. Where should we start?
Yes, and I think those are really good policies or policy proposals that should be changed, definitely. Another one that is actually, because I have to say that some policy options in the EU seem to be very far away today, more far away than they were only 4 years ago, because the debate has changed a lot with the war in Ukraine. So it has changed a lot into other issues away from sustainability. But the one policy that seemed to get some traction now is at least on public procurement. So you may be aware that on public procurement, the only mandatory criteria for procurers buying food for schools, for example, or hospitals, is on price. It's possible to also say that we want to have a sustainable product. So there is that criteria as well. But when you look at it, most procurers go for the lowest price. And now what the hope now with the revision of the public procurement directives is that alongside the price criteria, there would also be the criteria of quality. And then, of course, quality is a broad criteria, but we were mentioning quality at the beginning of this talk. So I think that, best price criteria alongside with quality criteria is at least a step in the right direction. It will help procurers, and it is something that can actually happen during this mandate. Then I don't know if I should go into, maybe I should say something also about the agricultural policy, because I think that...
Yes, please.
Yes, I will do that then. So the EU has a really large budget for agricultural subsidies, and this is the Common Agricultural Policy. And this one is a huge policy, and it is being revised at this very moment for the next 7 years. It will run from 28 to 2034. And this new proposal, it does have some promising parts, but they are really small steps. And often when we talk about food, we put a lot of hope and trust into the production side policy. So we think that the Common Agricultural Policy is where we need to change. But that policy is very difficult to change in fundamental ways, partly because it's really like a small step policy, but it's also a production side policy. And it seems that when we talk about food, what is really missing is policies that can change the demand. Because the Common Agricultural Policy, it is sort of, it gives out, at the moment, the vast majority of the money, over 80%, goes to animal farming, either directly or through the production of feed. But if you look at the CAP as it's abbreviated, it's really sort of, it doesn't really care so much about the outcome, whether the production is for animal feed or whether it's crops for human food. But it is sensitive to the market. So if you can increase demand for more plant-based products, for more crops that are grown for human food, then there will also be incentives for farmers to switch their production. So that is why also this concept of food environments is so crucial, and that we have this, that we make the connection between the production side policies and the demand side policies, and look at public procurement, VAT reductions for veg and legumes that Marcin mentioned, for example.
So the production side policies that we currently have in the EU are mostly geared towards animal production. And when we look to demand side production, demand side policies, they're simply not there. There seems to be a disconnect between what we need to eat and what our regulations, or the lack of regulations, is promoting. But still, on the side of the production policies, Louise, Denmark created this plant-based food grant, is one of the first. It's a unique example of public investment in alternatives, in plant-based foods. How do you see this targeted funding influence the market dynamics?
Yeah, I think because it has like 3 focus area, the plant-based food grant, and one of them is kind of stimulating demand, because as Camilla said, it is really crucial that you create, and because this grant is primarily focused on Denmark, it was also create a national market, but also looking at the export, because Denmark is a huge exporter of food as well also. So that was actually, when we started the plant-based food grant for the first round, it was actually the prime focus was on kind of stimulating demand, because that is what everyone said, like this is really crucial to actually get this kind of sector going as well. And I also wanted to add a few things for Camilla when she talked about public procurement and perhaps creating more quality-based measures. And one of them, at least, because we come also, Denmark is highly focused on organic food, like that could also be a quite interesting or measure, also because it's kind of a scheme that is both like in EU, like you have regulation related to organic foods as well, and it will also kind of help support like environmental measures as well as biodiversity. So I think that could also be kind of a quite interesting or quite a welcoming measure to put into quality, actually, to have as a first step talk about organic foods there as well. And then we can also say, when we talked about demand or creating more demand through the plant-based food grants, a lot of the things have been focusing on more structural projects, which you can say, again, coming back to kind of professionals, like how can we make professionals provide more plant-based foods, because they do a lot of meals every day, and the public sector is really big, and of course it's differences from different countries, but also because it's kind of it's their work, you know, so there could be a pride, there's something, and it's kind of like they know also to handle like how do you actually make a delicious plant-based meal. Also, because what we've seen, at least in Denmark, it's actually like people use less time on cooking, and their skills is getting like less and less well developed. So actually focusing on professionals have been kind of one of the key entrance ports to creating a stronger demand. And it professional in a very broad sense. It's both kitchen professional, health professionals. It's also kind of agricultural schools. It's also nutritionals. So it's kind of a really broad scope of professionals you have to kind of think about in this context. Thank you.
So definitely the demand side, the consumer side is not just we going to supermarkets or going to a restaurant. There's a whole lot more behind. I think, Camilla, you wanted to add something?
Yes. So when Louise was talking about an action plan for plant-based food, it just came to mind that I forgot one of the policy developments in Brussels that are potentially interesting and could potentially also help us on the support for more plant-based food, and that is something that is called a protein strategy. So it's been talked about for a long time, but it has so far not happened. Now it's foreseen for next year. Now, maybe some people, or the way that it is framed, usually in the debate, is that we need more protein feed for animals, because the EU is importing a lot of protein feed, so we are not self-sufficient. So it's sort of part of this security narrative that we have. But still, a protein strategy should, and it has the potential of also incorporating more protein crops for human consumption. And unlike the CAP, maybe the protein strategy is also where it will be more easy to actually get some more of the demand side, to get that kind of thinking into the strategy, that we need the demand side. And also, I think we mentioned from all this both from Denmark and Poland, how farmers can also benefit from diversifying their production.
Yeah, and we actually have a couple member states that have their own protein strategies already. And one of the most important parts of those strategies that they actually set targets for the amount of, or the balance of animal and plant protein that we should be eating. And well, with the goal of increasing plant-based consumption. But of course, we're seeing a lot of adverse reactions to policies geared towards demand side. In Poland, that was possible. In Denmark, that was possible. But it was only possible, I understand, Louise, because there was such a huge coalition of stakeholders. They wanted to put this forward and negotiate with policymakers. How can we build such coalitions? How did it work in Denmark? How was Denmark able to overcome this hurdle or these adverse reactions that policymakers usually have against demand-side policies?
Yeah, thank you. I think I touched a little bit upon it as well. And of course, like policy work, it's the long-term game. So it's not something that's just happening within like the blink of an eye. So it's also been on our way more than 6-8 years, also coming in Denmark. But what we, at least when we reflect back, that we have done that created a momentum or a strong coalition, was actually making different types of collaboration with different actors within the agricultural sector, and also kind of making sure that we actually was focused on like more plants. So we didn't, especially when we had this kind of dialogue with farmers, we were very focused on kind of not talking about less animals because we cannot agree upon that, but just kind of what can we agree upon. And that was kind of, they could also see a business opportunity. They could also see a market for their farmers earning money as well, for like also for producing like crops for human consumptions as well. So that's been a hugely valuable thing, but it also have been taking quite a lot of time to build up this momentum. And also want to kind of like from what Camilla say, it's very positive also that the Commission have proposed this protein strategy. I think one of the things that we also in the task force we have kind of an EU action plan for plant-based food that we've been proposed a lot of stakeholders together. That has also been kind of like, we need to kind of see if we can get a strategy kind of within the overall protein strategy. That would be at least kind of our hope, which solely focus on plants for human consumption. Because at least what we have seen in Denmark, and also because we know farmers, organization and industries are, and animal-based industry are strong players, then we could be hesitant to see like if we can at the end of the game, would they kind of pull everything that is related to kind of human consumption and just focus on proteins, crops for feed. So I think in our advocacy, we really have to be very attentive to kind of see like, would we be in a situation where they pull everything in the last minute because feed is so important? So kind of how can we kind of make them kind of make something that is just primarily solely focus on plant protein for human consumption, to kind of have it as a like an underlining plan strategy, whatever, to the overall protein strategy. I think that was just at least something that we have been taking a lot of into consideration, just to make sure that we're not standing in a place where we don't get anything related to more kind of promoting or kind of developing like this plant-based sector, which we are in dearly need of, especially also now because of the food security and food sovereignty issue as well.
Exactly. So I think for everyone watching at home now, the message is do research the EU plant-based action plan proposed by a coalition of civil society and farmers, and do talk about it with your family members, with your policymakers, and make it a mainstream idea. Olivier, as we're seeing, social and political changes, especially in the food sphere, and this is what happened in Denmark, are usually achieved through a diverse coalition of stakeholders. In practice, how do you see the plant-based movement collaborating with other stakeholders? Are we doing enough to broaden and mainstream our ideas, such as, for example, a plant-based action plan? Do you have specific examples of collaborations that were successful as well in France?
Well, science is crystal clear when we talk about our diets, whether it's for health reasons, for climate reasons, for water pollution, environmental reason, you name it. We have to drastically change the way we eat. And the animal rights movement used all the scientific data available to push for a change in our diet patterns. But it seems like there's still room for improvement in terms of coalition and activism. Coalition, I mean, with NGOs, whether they are from climate background, environmental background, health background. Sometimes we don't collaborate enough. And we have to convince these big players sometimes to campaign on our topics. And we've seen in France that, especially in the health sector, big NGOs are quite reluctant to touch this field because they believe that the intake of meat is quite a sensitive issue, and even though they support us, they don't want to go public about that. So we have to convince them to do so. Also, what appears to me as kind of crucial is to try to be innovative in the way we build up our coalition, and maybe to try to think about how we could change all the enemies, so-called enemies, into future allies. I'm going to
how do you suggest we do that?
Yeah, I'm going to try to illustrate that with an example of a campaign. So back in 2015, so 10 years ago. Health 14 released an investigation about the grinding of chicks in France, and the outrage was huge. It was all over the press, and the egg sector was under the spotlight, and they did not like it. Of course, at the beginning, they didn't want to change their practices because why would they do that? But the French government had to impose a ban on chick grinding, and just overnight, the egg sector switched from I don't want to have a ban on chick grinding to okay, let's extend this ban at EU level, because the competition was not good. They had to pay extra to buy oversexing devices, so they faced higher production costs the European neighbors, and they, because of this investment that they have to do, so creating this uneven playing field among industries and among mid-sector, etc., could force companies to join demands that go in our direction within the frame of unexpected collaboration.
Excellent example. And a good way of showing that sometimes we really should have a lot more EU legislation to ensure a level playing field, even when some countries want to move ahead and then they can't, or they have a harder time because the production costs will be higher. Marcin, we started this panel by saying that, well, you collaborate with food producers and retail chains and public authorities. How do you see this coalition building in Poland, but also for the movement as a whole? And the follow-up question would be, if you could build these coalitions, or if you're being successful in building these coalitions, what would be the key mechanisms that this coalition should ask to be changed in policy?
So for the last few years, definitely the number of organizations working in the area of food systems in Poland has grew significantly. And we as Providge Poland are also a part of some of them. So big thanks, for example, for Future Food for Climate Coalition, the Safe Food Federation in Poland, the Polish Association of Plant-Based Food Producers. There are many great initiatives, and they tackle some different issues from different angles. And I think what is also important is this discussion, and kind of like what Oliver mentioned, is that like the world is changing. We need to also adjust our narratives to reach new possible allies and try to join the forces in our shared goal. I mean, animal welfare is of course very, very important argument for more plant-based food on our plates. But as we've seen last year, the health aspects grew, the environmental aspects, people became more aware about it. Right now we see, at least in Poland, but I guess in other countries as well, some movement towards, for example, food security aspects, benefits for farmers coming from, for example, the local pulses production, security in terms of during war, for example. We've seen, for example, in USA that, for example, their Department of Defense was investing heavily into alternative protein research for security reasons, for providing food in challenging times. So those coalitions, yes, could be aligned through many goals, through many shared values, and it's good to find this kind of colleagues within industry, within NGO sectors, within public administration. All of us want to make the world a better place. We just somehow define this in a different way, but looking for a shared language is always a great tool to start this discussion and search for allies.
And which key policy mechanisms would you be demanding that a coalition asks policymakers for? If you had to pick a few, yeah.
Yeah, sure. There are a few of them. For the economic reasons, I would say that the leveling the VAT rates. For public health, We currently have strong discussions about amending the public procurement for meals in schools. We see some movement. We see some changes, for example, about making it compulsory for schools to provide legume-based meal once a week. There are some other, let's say, less good amendments there, but some of the changes there and relations to planetary health diet are very, very good for our case. For food security, I guess we still need to start discussions with the ministries of defense to show that it actually, like in case of war, we don't need only an equipment, but also stable sources of food in a long term.
Exactly. And Louise, go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's just to add a thing. So I think also to kind of see if it's possible to make coalition. I think one idea, perhaps for everyone, if they don't have it, could be an idea to create some kind of network for plant proteins or something similar, where you actually kind of invite every stakeholder to come in, and where you, if you have the possibility or can look out for funding, to have different kind of events, because then you will get them all perhaps together in an environment where there will be sharing or getting more network, sharing different types of knowledge, sharing also, as Olivier said, what is the latest science and what is the latest development in different sectors as well. So just kind of, if people, if different countries doesn't have it, it could be a great kickstarter to actually see if you can find even more allies actually through creating a network.
And a key part in any alliance would be the consumer side, of course. And Camilla, something that has been very, very hot here in Brussels is the discussions on labeling. Several different types of labeling towards food. We're talking about the animal protection labeling. We're talking about discussions on Nutri-Score. Now we're even discussing, yes, once again, banning some words for plant-based products. How can is the European Commission taking meaningful steps to ensure that we have the right label in the EU, that consumers are sufficiently informed when they buy a product?
Yes, no, you're very right. There has been several proposals for different labels. I'm going to start with what you mentioned about the banning of different, meat-like names on veggie products, because that is interesting, because that is actually very unnecessary. So the demand for banning, so the argument that is based on is that consumers are confused if something is called, say, veggie burger. But actually, in this particular case, there is already regulation. So there is already a food information to consumers legislation, which works very well. So in that sense, consumers are already informed, and this is also something that has been shown in surveys and pollings that are done for consumers. Then what is actually missing, and where it's very difficult for consumers, it is when it comes to animal welfare, for example. And that is causing real obstacles, also in public procurement, for example, because it's very difficult to say how to see how an animal was actually raised from the whole lifespan, from birth until slaughter. The only labeling we have there is on eggs, and the egg labeling, you may know that it is about the housing system, and we could foresee something similar for animal welfare, but also taking more aspects into account. So that is something that would be really needed. And if we get the quality criteria in public procurement, then it would also help for procurers if there is a harmonized label. There are many national labels on animal welfare, but there isn't one that is harmonized across the EU. So that is a label that is really missing. There's also been the proposals about sustainability label, but I think that is now now sort of it has disappeared from the agenda. And the animal welfare label is also not happening anytime soon. But I would really like to stress that that would be really, really needed.
So what you're saying is that we would need EU level regulation on the animal welfare labeling. So no matter where you are in Europe, you could have the same logos, the same information, the same standards, and consumers will be, well, better informed.
Could I also add a slight bit for also what Camilla said about the labeling? So like a reflection also from our part could also be like this kind of now coming back to this domination and this ban again, if it could have something to do actually much more related to cultured meat or precision fermentation than it's actually have with kind of what we kind of mostly known as fermented or plant-based products, as they is like built from more like raw materials. So it's actually kind of a way to kind of perceive the future, like we can actually make something that is meat, but just in a lab. And that would, for a lot of stakeholders, still be something that they are really, really heavily against. So I would say that could be one of the reasons that this kind of banning is coming ahead. So kind of also to prevent something that perhaps will happen in the future, and which also could be very much needed. But actually right now, because we see most product, as you said, Camilla, like consumers are not confused at all. They know, and of course you can see the labeling. So I think that is just kind of, unfortunately, their discussion, and it takes a lot of energy away actually from wanting to kind of build up this sector and actually make it compatible and actually get much more innovation and much more stakeholders coming into this sphere, which is quite disturbing and very kind of hindering like a faster development that we would love to see.
Exactly, and taking that misconception or sometimes even lack of education of policymakers or consumers on these new technologies. I would go back to you, Marcin. Of course, an important part of your job is educating on alternative proteins. How does ProVeg Poland work to promote informed choices and to support innovation in the spirit of a healthy competition?
So I would say in our case, we are, the structure of our organization works like this, that we are the local office in Poland, but of course we have a strong support from our headquarters. So we have much knowledge from other countries in which the alternative protein sector is way more developed, like Germany, Netherlands. We have our offices right now in I think 15 countries across the whole world. So it's actually a good platform for us to share the best practices internally, and then propose and mention what are the best cases that could be adjusted for Polish market. We do it by sharing, promoting reports, insights, consumer data from other countries and from Poland as well to the Polish food sector. Of course, many of the companies are not producing only for Polish market, so it's also important for them how does the situation looks like in Germany or the Netherlands. We often say that what is happening in those countries now will happen in Poland in the next 3 to 5 years. So we help businesses understand those market trends. We participate in coalitions. We bring together food producers and other stakeholders through our events, like the New Food Forum event. So we discuss the latest developments about alternative protein sector there. Referring also to what was Louise mentioned earlier about the nomination, I think like from our case, it's the disadvantage of this solution is also that it creates uncertainty for the producers. So it's harder to invest in branding, in names, in creating strategy, if it can be crushed within a month or two when this kind of proposal pops up. So that's, I think, additional aspect of why this possible denomination ban could be so harmful for the industry.
Yes, and I believe we'll have some time to Q&A. So please, everyone watching, leave your questions and do tell us the story if you ever bought a plant-based product by mistake in the supermarket because you couldn't understand that it was a veggie burger or a veggie sausage. And talking about education, of course, a counterpart is misconceptions, and some misconceptions might be even created on purpose. So going over to you, Olivier, an integral part of a level playing field and a healthy competition is that information is available to everyone, and that communication, well, it's honest and based on facts. Facing resistance from possibly many industries, and L214 is very well known for your great communication campaigns. Which strategies do you see that should be applied to create a more level playing field, or which legislative actions should we take to ensure a level playing field on the communication side as well?
Well, I agree with what has been said already, especially by Camilla, when it comes to legislative actions and the different opportunities that we have at EU level. So I won't develop on that. But I'd like to say that we hear the industry, we hear Copa-Cogeca talking about like the need to produce and to eat meat extra and to keep like things the way they are, but I believe we scarcely hear farmers talk about that. In France, we've seen protests over the past years, and it was farmers. It was not at the beginning led by farmers' union. It was just people who were living in horrible conditions with very high debts, and they were really suffering, and they wanted to find a solution to their suffering, basically. And I believe that farmers and animal farmers are not necessarily reluctant to shift their production towards plant-based products. I don't have data for France, but I've been through a report on it. It was in Poland, I believe. And it was just interviews to animal farmers, and half of them were okay to shift from animal production towards plant-based production as long as they can make a living with that. So I'd like to put that here for the discussion. Like, should we also try to shift the narrative and to give the voice to the farmers so themselves can say that it's okay to change, it's okay to change our habits. We are okay to do so as long as we can live, as long as we can make a living with that. And also we believe that, we, L214, believe that retailers are a very big and key player in terms of diet change, and they could be campaigned. And today L214 is at the very beginning of a big campaign aiming to save 600 million of animals every year in France by 2030, which roughly corresponds to a 50% reduction of the number of animal deaths here annually, and replacing them by plant-based products. And we decided, after long thoughts and long brainstorms, to frame it as like that, and not as a shift in the conception, because we need to deliver in terms also of story. We need to make citizens understand that themselves they can change something, they can save up to 600 million animals. And we believe it's a very happy message, and that we've got to convey happiness, optimism, and yeah, we'll talk about that in a few years. And yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that seems like the great angle, pulling on the positive side and involving farmers more. I want to ask Louise on this next, but first I think Camilla wanted to add something.
Yes, I wanted to pick up on the importance of retailers that Olivier mentioned, because I think that the retailers are often left out, and even like in Brussels, you can see that even the organizations that are representing retailers, they are protesting that the Commission is focusing so much on agriculture that they are leaving out the middle chain in the vision that the Commission has for food and agriculture. And there has been, and I don't think it's unreasonable, because retailers are such an important part of the food chain, but mostly the talk is, we discuss about farmers, about regulating farming, but really talking about also putting obligations on food businesses and on the middle chain. And of course, there are some examples of that when it comes to unhealthy marketing unhealthy food to children. And in the EU, there is now a voluntary code of conduct for businesses, but some of the things that are in that code of conduct could maybe be binding for all businesses. So I think that is something that would be also important to think about when we talk about food environments. And of course, we can work with the retailers and have campaigns, but I think there is also room to regulate.
Yeah, Camilla, still looking at this possible competition between retailers. Some retailers are definitely moving ahead, setting goals for more plant-based food sales, for more plant protein sales. Looking at the theme of our panel, competition, do you see these retailers having a special competitive advantage in the upcoming years because they were the first ones to move and set these targets?
I think so. Yeah, and I definitely hope so. But it's hard to say. But I do think so. I do think so. And I think that the more, because I hope that consumers are rewarding those retailers. But of course, there are also difficulties because of now we are in a cost of living crisis. So we also have to be aware that price is a real issue for many consumers. So I can't really predict.
Yes, thank you. And Louise, going back to the relationship with farmers, of course, to develop the plant-based, the action plan on plant-based foods, you involved a lot of farmers in Denmark. Can you elaborate how that relationship went and how you were able to involve the farmers as well?
Yes, it's coming a little bit back to the network for plant proteins that we created back in 2019, where of course we also invited the food and agricultural farmers, like the Food and Agricultural Council, which is the biggest farmers organization in Denmark. And they actually participated and got quite curious also because we had a lot of focus on kind of market developments and possibility for farmers and growing the market as well. And so they were actually the one asking us together with another organization to do actually a research and development strategy for plant-based food. So that was actually the farmers themselves saying, like, we want to give more opportunity to our farmers, and we can see it's not like and or, but both and. So actually we want to give them more possibility to actually grow and have more income streams as well also. So that was kind of also them initiating, and that have kind of kept on building the development with them actually, and which also mean now that we have an initiative called Danish Plant-Based Diplomacy, where we have 7 organizations behind it, and one of them is the Food and Agricultural Council, and actually one of their innovation directors is going out and coming with us to different countries. He's been in Brussels, Madrid, Athens also, and coming there and speaking like, why is it a good idea also for farmers to be involved in the kind of the narrative on like more plants, like they should also have more, it could be an income stream for them. Why we should also engage also in this growing this plant-based sector. So kind of we had the possibility, of course, also we have a very innovative and some very positive vibes also from them, but also because we of course have been engaging in a very pragmatic dialogue with them, and also kind of saying like, we also know what we do not agree on, and instead of like using a lot of time on that, we kind of focus on what we actually agree on. So we've been very fortunate and lucky actually to have such a close collaboration with them. But I really hope that we over the coming years will actually see this kind of development also in other countries as well. And of course also we have a close collaboration also with the organic farmers, and that would also be a place where we would normally would say it would be a good place to start, because they would also often have a focus, like they want, like you can say, better meat, but then they will also kind of see, if we need to grow everything organic, we also will need a much different balance between plant-based protein and animal-based proteins as well. So that would also be a very interesting start to have conversation with their, if you have any organic animal farmers organization, to have a conversation with them also, because sometimes they also are a bit more innovative or very curious also about the plant-based proteins.
Yeah, so we've discussed farmers, but what about the traditional international big food corporations? Something that we often hear in policy from certain policymakers is that they might even agree that we need policies to change more towards plant-based foods, but they really don't want the market to be held by a few global corporations. They really don't want this level of concentration. How do you answer to those policymakers, and what can we do is to prevent these monopolies or market consolidation?
Was it a question for everyone?
Yes. Yeah, I'd like to hear everyone, of course, but starting with you.
Okay, I didn't want to
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
I think it's a tricky part, but because we know, like, a lot of these big corporations actually have a big share of the market. I would say when we come to kind of innovation, then sometimes you will need smaller companies to be more agile. It is not possible for a huge corporation, but we also need big corporations, because they also perhaps have more like much more like a set up value chain, and they also have a big more like a marketing setup and everything, which could actually help like accelerate it. It doesn't have to be an either or, but I think it's actually something that is quite tricky, because we need both. But at least what we have seen in Denmark is, like, when you see like the real innovation, it will often be from like some of the smaller companies, like somewhat like some more like interesting innovations, where from the bigger companies it's much perhaps a bit something that they adapt from other ones or kind of tweak. So definitely we still need to have a strong focus on kind of how can we support these startups actually within the food sector, for sure.
Thank you. Marcin, what's your take on this market consolidation?
I would say that I agree it would be very good to support programs that are investing in startups. And as Louise mentioned, I mean, the startups are more agile. They can go and test and switch the projects and adjust to the market needs way more quickly than big corporations. So the more startups are involved in creating good quality, plant-based, affordable, sustainable, based on local sources products, then we have a bigger share of it in our market. Another way, I think, is also like direction for consumer education is to, because the market share, we are speaking right now mostly about, I guess, processed food, but speaking about whole foods and unprocessed food, it's more about creating opportunities for local farmers to transform their goods, their veggies, their pulses, their fruits to big cities, to all people in general. So I think this kind of policies in which we have access to fresh, seasonal, local veggies and creating opportunities for it, it's a good step to actually move the balance from big corporations to local farmers.
Yeah, thank you, Marcin. I think you touched on a very important point, is that usually if we actually have some kind of public policies and programs to support innovation and startups, to support the development in our universities, then there's a higher likelihood that these products will end up being produced and sold by small companies, SMEs and startups. Olivier, how do you see this situation also with the French perspective?
It's a very interesting question. What happens in France is that we see some startups trying to develop their products, and quite often they are painted portrait by the right and by the MEPs trying, to ban meaty names for plant-based alternatives, etc. These startups are portrayed as puppets from the Silicon Valley. I know it's bonkers, it's just ridiculous, but that's the way it is. So of course they've got, it's important that they exist and they sell their products and they grow bigger, etc. That's great. And some of the brands in France, there are still small companies, but they do a great job in terms of marketing. I'm talking about, for example, La Vie Foods. They are very famous in Paris because their posters in the metro station are just incredibly smart, funny, catchy. So that's the best in terms of marketing. On the other hand, I'd like to say that it's good to have large companies involved too, because the right and MEPs that do not want plant-based food to grow bigger, they will not be able to portray these big companies as Trojan horses or puppets from the Silicon Valley. And also the presence of this huge player carries a huge weight in terms of possibility of lobbying and pressure in order to have more balanced food markets.
I think Louise wants to add something to that.
Yeah, and also for Marcin, I think very interesting also, as you said, like focusing not only on processed food, but also on whole foods, see if like creating shorter value chains. And I think that would also connect to what Camilla said about actually these public procurement actually. So how can we actually make sure like farmers or people perhaps not like farmers can be giving like their crops or selling their crops actually perhaps to their closest municipalities or the closest city. So these shorter value chains connected with the public procurement would also be very interesting actually perhaps to make sure that we also still have a lot of smaller or like medium-sized company actually being engaged in the food system as well.
Exactly. I mean, if in public procurement, the main criteria to give a company a contract is the price, then the big companies usually are rewarded. So even there, having a little bit more regulation and sustainability, environmental criteria might help. We covered a lot of ground today here with a lot of policy, but going back to something more touchable for all of us as consumers, and there's people, how do you see the market evolved in the last few years in your own countries? Maybe starting with Marcin, how did you see the plant-based market and the consumption of plant-based foods evolved in the last few years in Poland?
So the recent sales data show that the market was booming through pandemics, through the, I would say, the first like between 2019 2022, and for the last few years we have kind of like, I would say, stagnation for the market of plant-based meat. There definitely the prices, the high inflation in Poland resulted in, I would say, not that significant growth. The market for plant-based meat became stable. The market for plant-based milk is growing at this similar rates. Is very visible that at the biggest discounter, the plant-based milk offer is always there. So that's very, very a positive sign. We have some data about slight meat consumption declines in Poland. In total, of course, there are those stronger decline for red meat and slight growth for poultry. But the thing, I think, also a positive sign is about pulses, because we came up to data recently that the pulses, both consumption and production, grow significantly in the last 3 to 4 years. It's both for consumption and for area of production. It's a growth of around 50%. So a significant growth. It's from a low level, I would say. Of course, the pulses consumption used to be very high. It came down to a very low numbers, but hopefully it is getting back again. So let's hope this trend in this case will continue.
Thank you, Olivier. France is also known for some dishes with pulses. How's the consumption evolving in the last few years?
I'm not sure I could tell you about the consumption of pulses, but about the consumption of meat, we've seen a very slight decline of red meats, especially beef, and the chicken intake goes slightly up. So it doesn't really move significantly in terms of volume, but in terms of animal killed, it worsened over the years because we kill more chicken, so it does not go in the right direction. But when it comes to plant-based alternatives, then the increase is quite significant over the year, so it's good. And it's especially notable because if you find yourself in a French supermarket, in the meat part of it, you will find kilometers of ham, and you'll need a map to find the only place where they sell a few alternatives, so that consumers are able to find them and to buy them. It's very good, and so I'm quite confident that people want these alternatives, and they just need the food environment to change in order to be able to buy what they want and to have finally a free choice.
What about the attitudes of society towards these plant-based foods? Is that not just the consumption, but the general attitude, since France is known for having very strong opinions regarding food and their traditional foods? How is that attitude changing, if it is at all, of course?
Yeah, it is. A lot of people realized that for health reasons to go slow on it, and sometimes once in a while to have a plant-based alternative. So it's good. The only problem is that we have a lot of people with a very large audience who keep saying that it's Frankenstein food, that it's not natural, etc. So these people, these voices, and sometimes these political parties are able to shape a narrative which just does not reflect the reality of the opinion of the people.
Is this the case in Denmark as well, or is the narrative a little bit more positive towards plant-based foods?
Yeah, I think the picture would be quite similar to the one that Marcin shared also from Poland. And now also there this kind of new discussion on ultra processed food is also a not highly unwelcoming debate also coming in, which also where people getting a little more, hesitant just because they do not have as much knowledge about foods. So they get a bit more insecure if these are actually more healthy for them, which they're studies have shown that overall they are as well. So it seems like there's kind of this narrative also have kind of made people a bit more uncertain, which is also again why we would really love to see or think that also a lot of their more plant-based products, also from the raw materials as pulses, veggies, legumes, and all of these things would actually have to come from professionals actually for them to kind of inspire also people's consumption at home, and perhaps also introducing more slightly processed food and also see these are actually healthy. And it will also kind of this kind of new discussion on ultra processed food will also mean that food producers or people developing new types of plant-based products actually have to pay even more attention actually to make sure that their product is as healthy as possible, and perhaps even also with much more clean label that we've been seeing until now. I can just also share with Oliver, I was in one of their supermarket in Paris, and you actually found a baguette with their ham and plant-based ham and cheese. So that was very lovely to see as well also. But as we said also with Camilla, I've shared with the food environment that it's still sometimes placed in a special category and not next to the things that they are supposed to actually replace, which actually would mean that a lot of consumers would not look there because they kind of don't see themselves perhaps as vegetarians and vegans and want to have something different. So I think there's still a way to go also to kind of make it easier for people to have the option to choose plant-based products.
Yeah, I think Camilla, for everyone at home, Camilla is having some connection issues, but I will move with, a closing statement from each one of you. Over this hour, we talked about the policies that we should implement, that the EU should implement, each country should implement. Now I would like you to reflect shortly in 1 minute or less in the good policies towards healthy competition that your countries have adopted. If any, if not, you can also say that nothing has been done. And maybe to make it easier, I would start with Louise. We already heard about the plant-based action plan and the plant-based food grant. Are there any other policies that you believe Denmark adopted that should be replicated in other countries?
Yeah, just to add a slight nuance to the plant-based food grant, which is this funding mechanism, which I think is very helpful in supporting kind of creating a plant-based sector. That would also be that the grant is actually built as such as 50% of the funding goes to organic plant-based food. So actually having this organic element would also kind of help us also kind of connect with the organic production, and also kind of ensure that we actually also deliver on goals on environment, and we also deliver on biodiversity, water, better water environment as well. So that could also be a connection, kind of how can you get other measurements in? And we really see that there's a really strong and really good synergy between those. And of course, we would love to see from this year, there would be kind of an impact assessment of the projects kind of funded in the plant-based food grant. So hopefully over the next 1 to 2 years, we will be able actually to share, to see like what is actually the impact of these projects. And hopefully we can show a lot of good results. Thank you.
Marcin, what are the best practices from Poland that we all should adopt?
Yeah, I mean, I would say besides some positive signs that I mentioned earlier about possible changes in our public procurement and bigger inclusion of pulses and legumes, I would say that, at least in my opinion, the topic of planetary health diet is becoming widely respected, at least at the narrative stage across different ministries. So the references to this topic are present both in the Ministry of Health, the Materials, Ministry of Agriculture. It is also part of new curricula for primary schools. So it's a good positive sign that there is some kind of awareness that this topic should be promoted and should be mentioned in many different aspects. Another thing that I would say is slightly growing, slightly popping up, but those are some national grants for innovations, for food innovations, and some of them are related to companies operating in alternative protein space. It's not probably the level as we see in some Western countries, but I think it's for our case it's quite reasonable, and it's starting to grow. So let's hope that this will continue in the following years as well.
Thank you so much, Marcin. Olivier, what about France? Are there any policy best practices?
Well, maybe you're aware of the fact that our prime minister just was changed a few days ago, but just before he left his office, he managed to change a strategy that is being discussed between different DGs in France, and it's a food strategy. And the food strategy that was agreed upon was mentioning the need to reduce the intake of meat, with no objective, no days, etc. But still, like the principle of we need to reduce the intake of meat was in there. And just before he left, François Bayrou, our previous next minister, managed to erase that. So there's still room for improvement in France, and we've got to look in the future, because right now, like it does not look very good in terms of we do not set a very good example. We are not leaders in Europe in terms of shift towards plant-based alternative.
Well, thank you, Olivier. I think we are all going to keep working to improve that future and to make that future happen. I want to thank you very much for attending this panel and for your excellent contributions. I want to thank everyone that is also watching us at home. I hope all your questions were answered. And to close, just to highlight that the next panel will start at 6:45 Central Eastern Time. And it is Behind the Green Mask, food industry's marketing tricks. So stay tuned. I believe it's also the last panel of the EBS this year, so don't miss it. And thank you so much. It was a pleasure being back this year with this great panel of game changers that are going to continue changing the game for consumers, for companies, and on the policy level.